For over a decade, Nigeria has lived under the shadow of bullets, bombs, terrorism, kidnapping, banditry, and mass burials. Children vanish from classrooms. Communities are razed. Highways have become hunting grounds. And yet, year after year, the people in charge say victory is just around the corner. But Nigerians are not asking for promises anymore. They are asking for truth. Why is this war still raging? Who or what is standing between Nigeria and peace? Is the problem competence, politics, corruption, or betrayal within? Nigerians don't need rehashed answers. They need honesty. So no filters, no politics, just truth. Today we sit face to face with a man who stood at the very top of Nigeria's war command, former Chief of Defense Staff. I am Eshomomo Imodu. This is Fireworks. We put them under check. General Lucky Irabor, welcome to my talk.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we've had this heightened insecurity and kidnapping, especially of children. Now, this is happening despite years of funding the military. Now, would you say that the military is losing this war, or it was never meant to win these fights?
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to have one-on-one with you.
All right.
Your Fireworks. First, the understanding of, like, the premise upon your question is, in my view, misplaced. This is part and parcel of what I consider to be the challenge with the level of insecurity in the country, because it's viewed as the war being undertaken by the military, which is
but who is taking
false. The nation should be at war, not the military to be at war. The responsibility for the protection of schools is not that of the military. Of course, the military has found itself now with so many of the problems of insecurity being undertaken by the military. Internal security, of course, has become the main preoccupation of the military over the last decade, even though wrongly. So when we say, is the military winning the war, then of course it creates an understanding or an impression that the nation is not at war. We have a section of the nation, which of course is the military, that is at war. That is not how wars are fought. The nation is at war. The nation should be at war.
Okay, Nigeria is at war.
Nigeria should be at war.
Who is leading the fights? Who is at the forefront of the war?
Good. So the security agencies, the military being part of, are those who have been charged with that responsibility. And so until we deconstruct the issue of insecurity within our environment, we will not be able to know what next to do. And that's why it will appear that whilst a lot has been done, we appear to be running in circles. And I think that is where we have gotten it wrong.
Now you said it appears, despite the much that has been done, we're just running in circles. But you see, to the man who's lost loved ones,
correct,
to the military, that's something I read that you said over 2,000, probably about 3,000 military personnel have been
correct,
killed in this war so far.
Correct.
And those are also heads of families, also
correct,
have families, they
correct,
have wives, they have children.
Correct.
A lot of civilians been killed. These days, people are being kidnapped at will.
Correct.
Now, to that man, he wants to understand who has a responsibility to prosecute this war. The nation has a responsibility, but some institution is leading it.
Okay.
So what exactly is happening? Why is it hard for us to arrest this situation, and it's like we now have a resurgence of what we thought we had tamed over time?
Lovely. I think we're now back on track to address the issues.
Okay.
First and foremost, it is the government that has the responsibility for the protection of lives of its citizens. So, of course, in our Constitution, Section 14, Section 2B, it talks about the responsibility of the government is the security and welfare of the people, which is the primary object of government. And I think we must get so when you talk about providing security, of course, it's the government's responsibility. Of course, the government, is amorphous. Amorphous in the sense that, every one of us were part and parcel of government. So meaning that whereas you have security agencies, that does not mean that other, individuals that form part and parcel of the state itself are not responsible. So, but then there are those who are at the forefront. And this is why I have always maintained that security, and of course, not just me, but a good number of people, when they say that security is everyone's responsibility, is from this, this understanding. But then there are those at the forefront, to which the military and of course the police and other security agencies are there. Meaning that, through the back end, there are a lot of activities that should go to support, if you like, to go to, complement the effort of these agencies. So, in direct answer to your question, the Nigerian security architecture needs to be tinkered with, and I have advocated, and I'm glad that in your question you did make reference to the figure that I indicated in the book that I published recently, which is the fact that between 2013 to the year 2019 or thereabout, that we have lost over 2,700 personnel from the military, which is a figure that is well over a brigade strength. And that tells you that it's quite a huge number. And of course, by now, that figure perhaps must have gone beyond 3,000. So what needs to be done is that there has to be a rejigging of the security architecture. First and foremost, for the policymakers and of course the political strategy to understand what it implies when you're dealing with national security issues. What are the threats? What are the things that we must do? The security agencies that you have established, what are their strengths and what are their weaknesses? What should we do as a nation to be able to offset the vulnerabilities that they have, the weaknesses that they have?
So are we addressing that at the moment?
So I'm glad that, I mentioned at some point that, look, the whole essence of my writing is to start a conversation. And unfortunately, even though the conversation is on, but we've had series of not too pleasant occurrences to which you have asked me to appear on this program, which is, of course, the losses that we've had, not just with the school children, which is quite unfortunate, but also within our security forces. And just after I published the book, there was the issue of the U.S. President's comment, which elicited a lot of reactions. And of course, at the National Assembly, both the Green Chamber and the Red Chamber, even as we speak, the Red Chamber, I think they're having a security summit. Incidentally, I've been invited to be.
General,
so the point here, and let me run over that. The point I'm trying to make is that there's now a conversation, which I believe that at the end of the day,
while we're having this conversation, yes, lives have been lost.
Of course.
So for how long are we going to be having this conversation?
Well,
we just talked about the summit.
Yeah.
Now, people say Nigeria is not bereft of ideas. We've been talking. We've been having conferences.
Correct.
Now, with all the conferences we've been having,
yeah,
why is this war still raging? Some persons say it's because of the economy of war, that probably the military personnel are benefiting, or probably some politicians are benefiting from sustaining this war. Do you share this mindset?
How can I share that? How can I share that view? It is a classical nonsense. The point is, conferences could be held, but whether you take signals out of the conference or you allow the conference to end up in noise is a different issue. I studied electrical electronics engineering, and so there's what we call signal to noise ratio. So it is for me as an engineer, I'm interested in the signals. I'm not interested in the noise, even though I take note of the noise to be able to know what I must do to be able to optimize my signals. And I think that conversation should lead to solutions, and in the solution in this case is what is the signal and not the noise.
From the political class and from the military class that we are taking those solutions into practice now.
I believe that there's a closing up of gaps. Gaps have existed, and I'm glad that I've also followed.
Gaps have existed.
Of course, gaps will always exist in any environment. But what is important is that you close up gaps. I think that in this case, there have been a very wide gap over a long period of time. And that also brings me to the arguments people have made. Each time you talk about our involvement in peacekeeping operations and even peace enforcement in Liberia and Sierra Leone, which of course I was part of those two operations anyway, while I was in active service. I know what transpired. The key question many people have not asked is, after those expeditions that we had, after those experiences that we had, relative to what we're now having back home, what is the form of the military at the time, and what is the form of the military currently? What is the equipment disposition of our troops when we went into Liberia and Sierra Leone? And what is the equipment disposition and the equipment disposition of what we have currently? But it's not for me to come to the public to talk about the equipment disposition currently. But I'm trying to bring about the fact that if there has to be some element of relativity in your assessment. So if you're looking at what was done in the past, it must be a comprehensive.
Now, would you say that the political class is doing actively what it should do, and exactly maybe 2 steps? What are those 2 things you think that they should do immediately if we must arrest this?
Okay, first and foremost, I must admit that as a nation we have failed substantially. And I think that what responsible people do is to take stock, and I believe that we're beginning to take stock where we have failed and what made us to fail. When I was growing up, what I was told and what we learned was that if a child falls, when he stands up, he rubs his tummy and then he cries to the parents. But an adult, when an adult falls, he stands up and looks back to see what made him to fall. So it is in that context that I believe that when I begin to take stock, it is not a time for blame game. Somehow our environment has been so complicated. It's been so polluted with all manner of vices, all manner of arguments, which of course stem from, the political divides that cut across the country. But then I believe too that leadership must also take responsibility. Must also first and foremost understand that in every climb, you must have those differing views. But then you must take the bull by the horn to begin to take stock and to be able to aggregate, voices and strength of those who will help you to be able to advance the cause of peace and development.
It might not be a blame game. It might just be because that we can't keep doing the same thing and expect a different result.
Correct.
Now you give an illustration of a child who fell and runs to the father.
Correct.
Now look at this last incident where the attack in Kebbi, where they said there was an intel. It was reported there was an intel, and just about an hour to when that attack took place, the military personnel were withdrawn. Now, have we also sanctioned, if we agree that we have failed, has there been appropriate sanction to those in authority, whether the politicians or the military? Because we can't just admit that we failed as a people. There are those who were saddled with responsibility. Don't you think there should be appropriate sanction? Because if there are no sanctions, people will think it is a good thing to keep doing the same thing.
Now let me, whilst I agree with you on the issue of sanctions, let me also correct an impression. Failure of a system may not necessarily be attributed to an individual. A failure over a period of time, if you begin to disentangle, who is responsible, you may do that in perpetuity. The counting the cost, if you like, or if, having to take stock.
We must make scapegoats.
No, wait, hold it. Whilst agreeing with that in some specific instances, I'm talking about a system restructuring, a system rebuild. I'm looking at wherein we begin to look at institutions, failure of institutions, failure of establishment. In advanced climes, they build institutions and make institutions to be thriving institutions, not champions, not individual champions. And so in this case, it is for us to begin to look at, what I'm advocating is when the training institutions, especially for the police, there's a lot of review, which is, a primary thing to be done, because you can't be training, you can't expect, in fact, what determines your level of efficiency is actually, a function of the level of training that you've received. And so that's a good thing. Another thing, of course, which the president has also directed is the recruitment of, I think, 30,000.
In addition to 20, so about 50,000.
About 50,000 policemen. And then, of course, the withdrawal of those who are serving the VIPs. Now, but again, it's not going to stop there. Now, training is one, all right? Because when you are training, you train with equipment. Now, after the training, you must also go work with equipment. So whereas the standard of training, even though it's not a one-off thing, because training is a continuous process, especially for all of us in the armed forces, I mean, it's a continuous exercise. You need to also have the requisite equipment to be able to meet the requirements. Beyond that, taking on additional personnel, in this case, we're talking about 50,000. It's not going to just be 50,000. I believe that they're also going to increase it, because we have always talked about the fact that our policing ratio is so low. Now, you'll be talking about the welfare of those men and women that you'll be recruiting. Where are they going to live? Will they live in barracks? Will they live amongst the people? And if they are going to live amongst the people, what protective measures have you been able to put in place? Those are resource-dependent issues. And that's why I also believe that going forward, after identifying what needs to be done, in this case the police, there are other agencies, of course the military, the DSS, and other
the civil defense.
The civil defense. Yeah. So you must look at all this, in totality, because at the end of the day, it's not just recruiting them and then you allow them to become criminals by themselves. I mean, we know what happens along the road. All right, that is because the right, welfare. Atmosphere, if you like.
They don't have it.
I mean, it's not available. We know where our policemen will live, and which is unfortunate. So it is for this reason that I believe that there has to also be a political will to understand, not just understanding these issues, but also to be able to deploy resources, prioritize and deploy resources to ensuring that the expected outcome is achieved.
Now, you're a former chief of defense staff, so
Correct.
Let's talk some practicals now.
Correct.
Meanwhile, we're trying to improve on the strength of the police and all that. But can we give a time frame? Because people are dying. People are living in fears now.
No, it's not my place to talk about the military giving assurance. But rather, I deal with government. The government should be able to. And that also brings me to the path wherein the spokespersons for government must speak life, must speak hope, must speak comfort to the people. And I believe that they are beginning to do that, and I'm hoping that they will sustain it. But beyond that, you must also understand that there are other elements of state power that must be involved, which of course is the populace, and including the press like yourself. That first and foremost, not only do you understand, should you understand what is at play, but the role that you are to play, not just speaking about the ills, but also creating a narrative that supports what the government is doing in order to give hope to those that are already hopeless. In fact, I must admit that the environment is quite toxic. The environment is quite depressing, no doubt about it, from what you read and what you also hear amongst several others. But then, any man that does not have hope has no reason to exist. And this is why we must always, use every opportunity to give hope to our people in order to be able to bring a proper closure to this.
I think closely related to that is that when you were the CDS, you
Correct.
talked so much about the kinetic and the non-kinetic
Correct.
approach.
Correct.
But people also talk about this de-radicalization. You were in support of de-radicalization.
Yes, I support it.
But
You sending somebody to prison, and then the person goes to the prison. Okay, now we don't call it prison anymore. We call it correctional center. Why is it correctional center? And when they finish their time, what happens? They will return to the public. They are going to the public space. That is what de-radicalization is all about. And in any case, those who we send to the Operation Safe Corridor are the low-risk elements, not the high-risk elements. The higher-risk people are the ones that are sent to the correctional centers. And this is precisely the confusion that has been transmitted to the people. And some even went to the extent of saying that many of these bandits have been recruited into the army. What a
so maybe the military did not communicate very well to the public.
You keep talking about, stop talking about the military. Stop talking about the military. People who have one ought against the government believe that it is the military. Any misdemeanor by one political party against the other is seen. The military is not partisan. The military is only an agent of the state. So how well do you communicate by what I've just told you? And I have maintained it even whilst in active service. Those who came after me have maintained it. You choose what you want to hear and what you want to believe.
I think Sheikh Gumi,
correct,
who has also made some statements,
yes,
and a lot of people have said it's an uncomfortable statement, yes, because he has said that just like you had for the Niger Delta, you had amnesty for them, and that these terrorists also should be granted amnesty and all that. Do you think that is a right narrative an individual should make, and what action can the government take?
First and foremost, I disown Sheikh Gumi. I do not share the same views with him. What I mean by the de-radicalization has nothing to do with what Gumi says. In fact, Gumi should, in my view, should be questioned. Let him explain what he's talking about. That's arrant nonsense. That certainly has nothing to do with what the Operation Safe Corridor is all about. Sheikh Gumi, I don't want to go into, I didn't come here to discuss Sheikh Gumi, so I believe that he has his own day with those, the security agencies, the intelligence security agencies, but that's not what I'm discussing. I'm discussing the issue of what we have as de-radicalization process, part and parcel of Operation Safe Corridor.
Safe Corridor.
That's what. So anybody making comparison with the Niger Delta amnesty program, I didn't say amnesty. I've not used amnesty program. I said de-radicalization. Yeah. So amnesty for criminals, no, I don't share that view. The problem of insecurity in Nigeria is very complex. If any attempt to disaggregate, or if you like, deconstruct them, leads you into one form of confusion that even people miss the context of what you are trying to explain and mix it to another. It's just like now, mixing what I've said with what
Gumi is saying. Now, one other issue before we go is the aspect of prosecuting the financiers of this. Do you think when there's because a lot of people say some of those boys that are on the field are not the real people, that there are people backing them up? Do you think if we really take our time to look to name these financiers and prosecute them, that it will help reduce this tension in the land?
There will always be. Logistics is the oxygen of any operations at all. In every establishment, if your logistics, even in our war fighting, if you get your logistics right, then of course the tendency for it to be up to 70% or even 75% ready for the war, will be there. But if you get your logistics, badly, then of course you are doomed to fail. Ditto for criminal enterprises. How do you buy a sophisticated equipment if not money? How do you sustain, even the food, the supply chain for the food, if not money? So yeah, I agree that identifying the financiers and taking them out of the system, breaking the network itself, will help in reducing this. We have good men and women in most positions in governance. We must understand that. These are our kids and kin. These are people we know. Yeah. So the question to ask is, if we think that they are not performing well, rather than see them and write them off, you should be able to ask questions, why are they? And that's what led me to saying that it is institutional rebuild that we'll have to talk about. Because accountability frameworks can only work not with individuals, but with systems, with institutions, with establishments. And I think this is...
Thank you so much for coming on my talk.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thanks.
You've heard it from the former Chief of Defense Staff, and that is all that time will permit us to take on this edition of Fireworks. Now, make it another opportunity next week. Watch the same platform, and you can go to the YouTube and check our videos on the YouTube. Bye for now. I remain yours sincerely, Shomomo Imodu.